Okay, so this is my mind map, and I've concluded that Daisy and Gatsby are essentially similar. Because they both crave status and wealth, they'll do anything for money, and they don't really love each other. And while they do have a lot of similarities, they also have some differences, which we'll get into. So, what's different between Gatsby and Daisy is Gatsby has a few characteristics that make him an admirable protagonist that people like Nick would admire. First of all, he's very motivated and committed to his goals. Like, he bought a house and waited 5 years for Daisy. So that's very admirable. He also is genuine, as shown in the quote on page 50, when the owl guy, he was in the library and he was admiring the books and was astounded at the fact that they were real. He said, "They're real, absolutely real, have pages and everything. I thought they'd be a nice durable cardboard." So the owl man thought that the books would just be for show like other rich people, and I think that the genuine books show that Gatsby's a genuine person, unlike the other wealthy people in the 20s. And maybe the house is like Gatsby, because it's really extravagant, and Gatsby's really extravagant on the inside, but on the inside he's genuine, just like the genuine books. Another quote that shows Gatsby's admirable characteristics is on pages 52 and 53, when Fitzgerald used imagery about Gatsby's smile. So I think that Fitzgerald used imagery about Gatsby's smile to show that he's a genuine, kind-hearted person, because the way he described his smile made him seem very likable and the kind of person you'd want to be friends with. And Nick also said, "I could see nothing sinister about him." And Nick is our moral compass throughout the book, and he admires Gatsby, so I think the author wanted us to like Gatsby too. But of course, he's had his faults. He's naive, delusional, and a criminal. Which we'll get into. Gatsby's very naive because he thinks that Daisy never loved anybody else and she still loves him. So he's pretty delusional for thinking that, and thinking that Daisy will give up everything for him. And he also, his version of Daisy doesn't really exist. He sees Daisy as more of a fantasy and an unreachable kind of goal. There was a quote that said that his kind of illusion of her overshadowed her reality. Like I said before, the differences between Gatsby and Daisy is Gatsby's has some admirable characteristics, while Daisy has little to none. She's manipulative and selfish, and she's a cheater, and she hurts people and doesn't really care about the consequences. One quote that shows that Daisy's manipulative is on page 13, when Nick said, "I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean towards her." So, everything that she is kind of constructed to make people feel a certain way. So that's how she kind of manipulates people's emotions. Another quote that shows that is on page 22. Page 22. When Nick said, "The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had just said. It made me feel as easy as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and sure enough, in the moment she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather distinguished secret society to which only she and Tom belonged." So first of all, Nick said that the whole evening had been kind of a trick to get an emotion out of her. I think Daisy was trying to make him feel bad for her. And also, twice on that page, the author compared Tom and Daisy. Compared Tom to Daisy. So I think that he did that to show that Daisy's like Tom in the sense that they both kind of think that since they're rich, they can do whatever they want and they don't care about the consequences. Also, when Nick was talking to Daisy right before she said that, he asked her about her daughter, and she said, "I suppose she talks and eats and everything," and then turned the conversation right back to her, talked about how hard her life is. So I think that there isn't really room for anybody but Daisy in Daisy's life. She doesn't really care about her daughter that much, and she kind of wants all the attention to be on her. So that shows that she's kind of selfish. And also or close to that same page, Tom said, "Don't believe everything you hear, Nick," right after Nick and Daisy had just had the conversation about her and how she doesn't like her life. And I think that shows that even Tom knows that Daisy's manipulative and she tries to make people feel bad for her. And also, if Daisy didn't like her life with Tom, she could have gone with Gatsby, but she chose Tom over Gatsby in the end. So another quote that shows how Daisy hurts people and doesn't care about the consequences is on 1314 when Nick first met her, and the author went into great imagery about her voice. And I think he did that to kind of compare her to a siren, who are mermaids, I think, that like they have a really nice voice that draws men in to their death. So that's kind of what Daisy did, because she drew Gatsby into his death, and that's how she kind of manipulated him, by pretending that she liked him, then in the end not choosing him. So she kind of used him. And also he died in a pool, just how the men at the sea would die from the siren. So I don't think that's a coincidence. Also, Daisy is corrupt, which is shown through her name, Daisy. Daisies are flowers that have white petals and then a yellow inside. So the yellow outside represents, or the white outside represents innocence, like how Daisy can appear innocent from the outside, because she's really usually polite and kind to people. But the inside yellow represents corruption, which is because she's corrupt and she hurts people just because it's convenient for her. And because she puts money and status over everything else in her life. And also, the author used white a lot when describing Daisy. Like, she dressed in white and had a little white roadster, and they were both in white, cool as their white dresses. So I think that shows how Daisy seems innocent on the outside, but she isn't really on the inside. So I think that's a really interesting concept between how Daisy appears and how she actually is. How, like, Fitzgerald portrays her through the white, and how Nick sees her as kind of corrupt and manipulative. Okay, and now onto their similarities, which are status and wealth. They'll do anything for money, and they don't really love each other. So first, status and wealth. So Gatsby, first of all, always uses old sport when he's talking to people. And that's a saying that was used by the wealthy, old money people, that he often uses maybe to seem old money or to try and fit in better with them. Also, he's incredibly polite and uses, quote, elaborate formality of speech. But that's kind of a front, because in the car with Nick, he revealed his true self, where he stopped talking so elegantly and like was slapping his knee more casually. Also, Gatsby's desire for wealth is shown through his desire for Daisy. So Gatsby once said her voice was full of money, referring to Daisy. Daisy represented everything that Gatsby wanted in his childhood, like wealth, status, and beauty, and he was so focused on those attributes that he overlooked all her personality flaws. He might have loved her once, but now Daisy and success have become conjoined in his head, and if Daisy was a poor girl like he was in her childhood, he wouldn't have loved her and pined after her like he did. Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, Gatsby really loved Daisy, but after all the years, she became twisted into something else. Like, not a person, but an attainable object and a goal. Something that he needed for success and for his American dream to come true. And that's, like, kind of an object that you can buy, and that's why he bought the house. And she seemed like an object you can buy to Tom, who kind of bought her with that necklace. A quote that shows that Daisy craves status and wealth is where she was going through Gatsby's closet and he was throwing all the silk shirts and she started to cry, which showed kind of her desire. And that was kind of a hyperbole, because, like, you don't cry at shirts normally. But anyway, it kind of shows, like, how obsessed she is with wealth. And, yeah. Another example is on page 81, when Jordan said, talking about Daisy, she began to cry. She cried and cried. I rushed out and found her mother's maid, and we locked the door and got her in a cold bath. She wouldn't let go of the letter, which was from Gatsby. She took it in the tub with her and squeezed it into a wet ball until it fell apart like snowflakes. Next day at 5 o'clock, she married Tom Buchanan without so much as a shiver and started off on a 3-month trip to the South Seas. Okay, so I think that letter kind of represents her love for Gatsby, like kind of how it was falling apart. I didn't say that part right. Oh, quote, she wouldn't let go of the letter. It was coming to pieces like snow. So that simile kind of represents how her love for Gatsby fell apart that night when she gave up that to marry Tom because of his money. And she didn't really look back after that. Also shows how she's a liar because she promised Gatsby that she would wait for him, and then she married Tom. So she gave up true love for money. So I think that shows how much she wants it. And knowing that her husband's cheating on her, she still stayed with him because he has money. And she doesn't choose Gatsby in the end because he's new money, and she cares about rumors and status and all that. And so she puts wealth and money above everything, above her own happiness and respect for herself. And yeah. And when she kills Myrtle, she shows that the poor are indispensable to her. And also, there's another quote on page 21 when Daisy said, "That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool." So she wants her little girl to be a fool, so then she'll blindly do what society says to do, or follow along with the societal expectations without looking back like Daisy did. I think that Daisy knows what she was doing was wrong, hurting people, and maybe she did love Gatsby, but now he's just a distraction. She wants her daughter to be a fool so that maybe she just does what she wants and doesn't feel guilty, like Daisy. Mark Twain once said that humans are the only creatures that are evil because they are the only creatures with a moral compass. So maybe she wanted her daughter to be a fool and not have a moral compass, so she wouldn't know what she was doing was wrong and wouldn't feel guilty. And she wouldn't be aware of all the wrongdoings going on in society and in the high-class world that she lives in. Secondly, they'll do anything for money. So Gatsby, like I said before, he has a lot of admirable characteristics, but he still did bootlegging to get money just for success. So I think that kind of cancels out all his good qualities because he sacrificed his morals and his values for money. So I think that also shows how obsessed he is with status and wealth. And Daisy will do anything for money because she stays with an aggressive, cheating, racist, not to mention husband, just because he's wealthy and he has status and class. And yeah, thirdly, they don't really love each other. Like I said before, Daisy kind of symbolizes success to Gatsby, and that's why he wants her so bad. I think wealth and status is kind of an additive to make people more attractive than they are. Like I said before, if Daisy was a poor girl, Gatsby wouldn't have pined for her like he did. And Daisy doesn't really love Gatsby anymore. He's just a distraction from her husband, who is evil. But she stays with him because status and wealth is important to her. Okay, so in the end, I think they're essentially similar because status and wealth is important to both of them. They'll do anything for money, which kind of goes along with that, and they don't really love each other. And I think that that's most important in defining their characters because Gatsby they would both sacrifice their moral compasses for status and wealth, so they would sacrifice everything for that. So I think that's what makes it the most defining characteristic of both of them, and they both have that in common. Okay, now about the comparing modernism to Gatsby. So all the stories that are told about Gatsby, first of all, the stories he tells about himself, they're lies. Like, he's reinventing himself and telling these stories about people because maybe they'll reinvent his past, which he's not proud of. So modernist idea if the author is remaking society with their art. So kind of these stories he tells about himself, Gatsby's own art, is maybe he's trying to remake his past with it. And I think he has created himself like a work of art. all the stories he tells about himself and the stories he lets be passed around, like he killed people and he's like cousin to famous people or something. And I think he's doing this because he's not proud of his past. He's always wanted to be rich, but he was born poor. And so I think he kind of wanted to erase that part of his life and move on to the one with status and wealth. So yeah.